everything that I've made and put out has been with the intention of, helping people to puzzle out their own answers. Uh, the way that I've hoped to affect the world is with positive uh, content that gets people thinking and gets people wondering. Uh, it's like a child. Once you release it into the world, it's going to go out there and do whatever it wants to do. My last film has been seen by millions of people, and it's still going strong in some of the outlets. That's highly gratifying. And, it's like, even if you don't make money, if you know you've affected some change on some level beyond what just one person can normally do, that's really where that's the payday right there.
Hello, my name is Senka Caro, and I'm founder of LightNet, and my passion and purpose is to make the impossible possible. I'm here today with Ron James, who is a filmmaker, an author, and an investigative journalist focused on the UFO phenomenon, consciousness, advanced science, and the mysteries shaping our time. He is the MUFON media director for the nationwide MUFON network, and he is also the director of the critically acclaimed Accidental Truth UFO Revelations, and he is set to release the sequel to that coming out in a few months. Ron James really has, over the course of his 12 movies and countless interviews, brought forward the questions that are shaping our future.
When you think you've discovered your purpose, you probably haven't. And that's because the universe unfolds in very, very mysterious ways. If I had an idea that I'd discovered my purpose and I was purposely trying to enact it, I might have missed a lot of the best opportunities that ever came along. So I think our purpose is really not ours to discern. Our obligation to our purpose is to be open to wherever we're led and have the intuition to understand when we're on the right path. So when I first started doing video production, I did it in Florida. I made an instructional video about screen printing because I owned a screen printing company, and I fell in love with the medium and I just wanted to keep working in it. So I sold off the screen printing company and bought half of a recording studio. And it didn't take long before I was self-taught in doing video production. And, I was in an obscure place in Florida near Pensacola. So Discovery Channel would come to town and they'd hire us to carry their gear and things like that. And it wasn't really why I got into the business. And I think the cumulative moment for me was one weekend I did spring break in Panama City and helped out the people from MTV, helped out the people from Girls Gone Wild, which sounds like it was fun, but it wasn't that fun. And I came back feeling kind of empty about why did I get into production? This isn't why I'm doing this. It's about something different. And oddly enough, that very day, I ran across an article in UFO magazine, and it was called "The Reality of Our Reality." And it was by a guy named Peter Gersten. And he was talking way back when, this is back in the late 90s, I think. He was talking about simulation theory and that we're living in an artificial reality. And I read that article and I was like, that's the kind of stuff I want to do. And I started playing around online and I found the International Conference on Science and Consciousness, which happened to be coming up. And so I bought a ticket, I packed my camera, and I went to Albuquerque and I taped a green screen to the inside of a hotel conference room. I was one of the first people to do that. And I just lassoed scientists into the room and interviewed Russell Targ and Dean Radin and Amit Goswami and Hagelin and just a bunch of them, Stanley Krippner, and came back with what eventually became my first Bigger Questions videos that came out in the year 2000 or so. And that's the path that I've been on ever since, is making media and documentaries about these topics. So in 2023, I released a UFO documentary called Accidental Truth. Matthew Modine narrated it, and it did very well. It won 28 Film Festival Awards, and A lot of people say it's one of the most important UFO docs that was ever done. That's others saying that. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. But the sequel is about to come out. And appropriately, it's called Accidental Truth Next. And after meandering around in Washington, D.C. for a little bit in the beginning of the film, we very quickly realized that we're never going to get the whole truth about what we're facing with non-human intelligence from these people in Washington, the same gatekeepers that have kept it a secret for 100 years or more. And so at the midpoint in the film, we have to just stop listening to these people, and we have to ask ourselves, let's just say that non-human intelligence is a reality. What's next? Because that's the question we really need to be asking, is what is next for humanity? Where does this all go? And some of the possibilities that we're forced to explore are just like people I've seen watching this movie at the end, they're really thinking about it, because there's a lot to think about. So Accidental Truth Next, again narrated by Matthew Modine and featuring actor Thomas Jane, is coming out in the first quarter of 2026. The most challenging part of any of this is just making sure that you have the financial wherewithal to do it. I have been I've always owned a production company, so I've tempered the jobs that I get paid for, like doing music videos. I've worked with Guns N' Roses and Smashing Pumpkins and Earth, Wind and Fire and a lot of big bands in that realm, and being hired to like shoot conferences and things like that pay real money, and then reinvesting that money in the things that I really care about. And it's never been super lucrative, but almost all the content that I've made, that I've originated, I've never really tried to make money off of. I did the Bigger Questions series and just put it up for free on YouTube. But for somehow or another, the combination of the paying jobs and then reinvesting in the things that you actually want to create has worked. But I mean, it has not been easy. And there's been times that I'm like, there's so many other things I could have done with my career that would have been more solid and more lucrative. And so you have to be willing to take those kind of risks, and you have to be willing to live with the consequences. And you have to do it for the right reasons, because if you're doing it thinking that, I'm going to make this film and it's going to make me a bunch of money and I'm going to buy a beach house, that's probably not going to happen. Although it did. There's that famous saying about regrets, and that is, it's like, I lived my life with no regrets. And I think about that a lot, especially as I get older, is, do I have regrets? And, I was raised in a very rough childhood, and I feel like life itself denied me a lot of opportunities. I spent early years of my life engaged in an all-out war against pretty much everybody. And that was very unproductive. And I often wonder how things would have turned out if I would have had more of a loving environment and more supportive environment. But that being said, the person that I am today has been forged in fire. And so yeah, you could look at me from a lot of different standpoints and a lot of different angles and draw your own conclusions. But I am 100% self-made and self-evolved. And so I wouldn't really trade that for anything. And however that plays out, it's going to be how it plays out. Everything that I've made and put out has been with the intention of, helping people to puzzle out their own answers. The way that I've hoped to affect the world is with positive content that gets people thinking and gets people wondering. It's like a child. Once you release it into the world, it's going to go out there and do whatever it wants to do. My last film has been seen by millions of people, and it's still going strong in some of the outlets. That's highly gratifying. And, it's like, even if you don't make money, if you've affected some change on some level beyond what just one person can normally do, that's really where that's the payday right there. It's almost a trick question when we think about why we're having research come back that says that people aren't living their purpose. Because if we're truly living in a universe where everything unfolds as it's supposed to unfold, then maybe your purpose is to not live your purpose. So to say that most people are not living their purpose, how do we know? one thing that I've come to discover over time is that we're all on this path, especially those of us that are deep thinkers and spend a lot of time wondering about the true nature of the universe and the true nature of our existence, and is there life after death? And we're pondering the questions that go beyond this realm that we live in. And we don't understand why everybody doesn't do that. And, you have to wonder, is everybody supposed to? Maybe what is obvious to us and what is important to us is not important to everybody. And as a good friend of mine who I consider, he just recently passed away, Sri Ramka, was a mentor of mine for a while and a friend. And he used to say, the people that are going to awaken will awaken, and the people that are asleep, just let them sleep. And at the end of the day, maybe their purpose is to sleep. Be careful, because if you're looking for your purpose, be careful, because there's a lot of people out there that would be happy to tell you what it is and take advantage of you the whole way through. So the first thing about looking for your purpose is to not be a sheep and ask to be led to your purpose. You should be able to figure it out. If you want to have some kind of exceptional destiny here on the planet, where, how do you even define that? I think everybody's purpose is to find their way back to oneness. And that is an unshakable purpose that applies to all of us. We make ourselves deaf, dumb, and blind to come into this simulated reality. And I think the most amazing thing we can do while we're here is puzzle our way back out of it. Because as they say in the Matrix, there's something wrong with the world. And so everybody's purpose is to figure out what this place is and why we're here. And how you get to that, there is no greater purpose that you can accomplish within this matrix than to figure out why you're here and be the best version of you that you can be. That's everybody's purpose. If you find fulfilling that purpose to be accomplished by taking a vehicle, like becoming a great musician or making films or making your podcasts and doing something amazing, and that's cool. But your purpose is your purpose, and your purpose is to evolve yourself as a spiritual being having a human experience and understand the illusionary nature of this world. I often wonder what kind of effect I've had on the world, because there's nothing quantifiable. I mean, occasionally I get fan mail, or I get recognized someplace and I get complimented. And then sometimes I get, denigrated online, especially in this cruel UFO community. I hope that I have put out stuff that millions of people have consumed, which I know that's true, but I hope that it has just made them stop and think for a minute in ways that they hadn't thought before. And if I've had that effect on anybody, that's a worthwhile thing to have done. When we ask questions like, what would the world look like if more people were living their purpose, we kind of have to look at, why is this world the way it is to begin with? If everybody was living their purpose, they wouldn't have to be here. They would have already figured it out and transcended this place. So if our purpose is to figure out the illusionary nature of our reality and to evolve ourselves as human beings, then this world would not serve the purpose of helping us discover our purpose if we didn't need to do it. Does that make sense? I mean, think about it. What do you get when you go through this soul school and we live these countless lives until we finally make our way back to source and can exist in communion and peace with the collective consciousness? Do we get to retain our individuality? Do we get to be us? Have we earned the right to control a certain amount of creative energy? Do we become little gods ourselves and now we can go out and create universes? That's something fun to aspire to. I think that when people pass away and they have a choice of determining what their next life is going to be, I picture this thing in my head, a physical manifestation of like Soul Central. It looks like a giant bicycle wheel in space. And the central hub is where you are dispatched. And just close your eyes and imagine this with me for a moment. Now, as you go out the spokes are all full of little hatchways, and you can open them up and you can look into worlds, and they all represent your options for the different lives that you get to lead, that you can do, that you can test, that you can experiment. And I think that down the end of one of these spoked hallways are some blinking lights, and they say Planet Earth, 21st century, greatest show in the galaxy. And we're all here because we heard it's going to be pretty wild ride. So everybody, do the best you can to make it a painful, pleasurable ride for all of us, and strap in, because you can definitely expect the unexpected.